Read the amendment.
Amendment by Turner.
The chair recognizes Mr. Turner to explain the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, this amendment is a very simple amendment. It would strike the enacting clause of this bill. Members, House Bill 2127 is unconstitutional. It's against the will of Texas voters, and it's so sweeping that we can't, as you heard from that extensive dialogue between the back mic and the front mic a few minutes ago, we don't know everything that this bill is going to preempt. We don't know every county rule or every city ordinance that's going to be preempted under this legislation. So, a little history lesson. Over 100 years ago, Texas voters approved a constitutional amendment authorizing cities with over 5,000 residents to establish a home rule charter. These voters understood that they did not want to depend on the Texas legislature to address every local issue and problem that arose within their communities. Voters 100 plus years ago understood that Dallas is different from Euless. They understood that Arlington is different from Austin. And they understood that the Panhandle has different challenges than the needs of Deep East Texas. Texas is unique and our communities are diverse. A cookie-cutter, one-size-fits-all approach simply does not work for our vast and complex state. Texans across our state elect local leaders who live in their communities and know what their citizens need. That's how they get elected. They talk to their neighbors and they respond to them about the issues that they're facing in their communities, in their neighborhoods. And so you might say, well, that was over 100 years ago, Chris. The state's changed a lot since then. You're right. It has changed. It's become bigger. It's become more diverse. It's become more complex and complicated. In 1920, Texas had a population of 4.6 million people. Today, Texas has more than 30 million people in it. In my district, city of Arlington had a population of 16,000 in the 1920s. It has nearly 400,000 today. And so, why would this House pass a bill that would remove flexibility and the ability to respond to local challenges from local communities when our state has only gotten bigger, more diverse, more complicated in the last several decades? It is the very definition of big government for this legislature to tell every single city and every single county in the state that they no longer are allowed to respond to their local needs of their citizens. It is the definition of big government to require all cities and counties to live under a state-run regulatory regime. One size fits all. This bill will harm our constituents. It will harm your districts. House Bill 2127 specifically preempts protections for workers that have been proven to save lives, including workers' basic rights to have a short break during the workday so they can take a rest in the shade and drink some water. Members, you all know how hot it gets here in our summers. Are we really going to sit here or stand here in this air-conditioned building and tell workers of Texas on construction sites that they are not entitled to one 10-minute rest break every 4 hours? Are we really going to do that? When we can walk over to that lounge anytime we want and get a drink of water if we get thirsty, we're really going to tell workers on construction sites they can't have a drink of water every 4 hours. House Bill 2127 preempts ordinances potentially that prevent discrimination. The bill author has said that non-discrimination ordinances are not included, but there's a lot of ambiguity around that. And I don't think we really know what's going to be preempted. On predatory lending, the law as written as it comes to the floor would prevent new predatory lending ordinances from being enacted. And even more concerning, would prevent cities that have existing ordinances because they were reacting to a problem, again, in their communities that they identified, from amending their current ordinances. And this is important because predatory lenders prey on vulnerable populations already in financial distress, trapping borrowers in a cycle of debt, by selling loans with up to 500% interest rates annually. These predatory lenders are already finding loopholes in current city ordinances around the state and preventing them from being amended, as this bill would do, strips them of their teeth in the future. Finally, the private right of action that HB 2127 creates will spur an onslaught of frivolous lawsuits, and Texans will pay the price. Almost everything a city does could be tied to one of the codes in this bill, meaning there will be an inevitable increase in lawsuits. Many of these lawsuits will not have merit, but will still cause a massive expenditure of taxpayer funds. The bill preempts things that I don't even think have been considered by the proponents of the legislation. The unintended consequences of this bill are innumerable. The bill could preempt valet parking restrictions, nuisance vegetation ordinances, firework regulations, catalytic converter license requirements, heavy truck ordinances. You get the idea. Anything you can think of potentially could be preempted by House Bill 2127. As a legislature with only 140 days to pass legislation every 2 years, does this body really want to spend our time regulating who can and cannot keep chickens on their property and how clean those pens must be? There are so many issues that deserve this body's attention. Issues that our constituents elected us to work on, like property tax relief, public education, fixing our electric grid. We are doing a disservice to our constituents if we tie up our time with legislating local matters and deny the ability of our local elected officials to respond to the problems in their community. This is an unconstitutional blanket transfer of power that will have far-reaching implications. It will harm the people that live in the cities and counties in your district and my district and everyone we represent.
Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Wu, for a purpose.
Would the gentleman yield for questions?
Would the gentleman yield for questions?
Yes.
The gentleman yields.
President Turner, how often does the Texas legislature meet?
We meet every other year for 140 days.
So the amount of time between legislative sessions is pretty significant, right?
About 18 months, about 19 months.
Yeah. And a lot of things can happen inside of 18 months.
Yes.
Were you here in this body when our state went through Hurricane Harvey?
Yes, I was.
Okay. Do you remember that after Hurricane Harvey, many of us, especially in the coastal areas, begged the governor to call a special session to deal with the aftermath of Hurricane Harvey?
Yes, I do.
Do you remember us ever having a special session for Hurricane Harvey?
My recollection is we did not have a special session after Hurricane Harvey.
And we were told, wait 18 months, right?
Yes.
And would it be fair to say that, the federal government, the nation as a whole, might provide a certain level of protection for people, and then the state itself can provide this same level of protection or can provide a higher level of protection?
Absolutely.
In fact, Texas, in many areas, Texas provides greater protections, especially in areas, say, like criminal justice, provides a higher level of protection than even the U.S. Constitution and U.S. federal law.
In many cases, that is true, yes.
And in that sense, many cities then go say, the feds provide the very, very foundation. The state may provide a little more protection, and we're going to provide even greater protection. Is that fair?
Yes, I think that's right, and I think that is a reflection that, again, cities are unique, and the needs, say, in Arlington and Grand Prairie that I have the privilege of representing are probably not always the same as Harris County that you have the privilege of representing.
And in fact, over the past decade that I've been in this office, we have heard people talk about the amazing growth of Texas and how so many people are moving to Texas. Have you heard those same stories?
Absolutely.
And the people who are moving here from California, from New York, they're moving to the cities.
Yes, they are. And
right.
they are drawn to unique quality of life attributes that different cities have. People move. I know people like to move to Grand Prairie, where I live, because we have an award-winning world-class park system. And we're located right in the middle of the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex. There's a lot of reasons to move to Grand Prairie, but other people may choose instead to move to Frisco because of their unique quality of life attributes that they have. Others may want to live, say, in Keller. There's a lot of different. Some people may want to live in Fort Worth or Dallas and have more of an urban living experience. There are a lot of different reasons people move, because cities and communities are unique, and we ought to embrace that, not try to undermine it.
Gentleman's time's expired.
Speaker,
Mr. Wu, for what purpose?
move to extend the member's time.
Members is objecting to extending Mr. Turner's time. Chair hears none, so ordered.
Mr. Turner, and would it be fair to say that many of these cities are putting these additional protections in because the cities that we compete with are also putting those protections in, and if our cities don't have the same level of protections, the same level of benefits, then we are no longer being competitive to our competitor cities?
Absolutely. That's absolutely right. And with people's increasing ability to work from anywhere, as more and more people have the ability to work virtually, that's a real consideration. People aren't tied down to one specific location anymore as much as they used to be, say, a generation ago. So people have the freedom to vote with their feet and move if they want it, if they don't feel like the quality of life is what they want it to be in their local community.
Because when we talk about economic growth, it's not just about the companies and the people who own companies, but it's also about the labor force and workers, right?
Well, that's exactly right, and that's one of the things that I find so problematic with this legislation. It really undermines basic protections for workers, very modest basic protections, I would add, for workers in our state. And the fact is, we do have a strong economy, and I said this before a couple weeks ago when we were talking about Medicaid expansion. It is the workforce of Texas that makes our economy strong. It is the workforce of Texas that makes our economy the envy of many places around the country and around the world. It is the workers who power and fuel this economy, and why we want to undermine workers' health and safety is beyond me.
So, and I know Chair Burrow says that the intent of this legislation is to make Texas economically competitive. But would it be fair to say that because we don't know the full implications of this legislation, and because we cannot predict what disasters loom in our future, that potentially this legislation may actually make us less competitive and less ready to deal with future disasters?
Yes, Representative Wu, I think that the potential unintended consequences, or perhaps intended consequences of this bill, very much could undermine what makes Texas great and undermine our local economy. And I think that it's interesting to say we got to pass this bill to be economically competitive when we're told all the time we've got the greatest economy. So which is it? Are we great, or are we in trouble and we need to pass this bill? I don't think you can have it both ways.
Mr. Speaker,
Mr. Martinez Fisher, for what purpose?
gentleman yield for some questions.
The gentleman yield for questions.
Yes, I will.
The gentleman yields.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Chair Turner. There are a lot of new people here on the floor, and I think an amendment that does strike the enacting clause seems a little extreme. I mean, have you tried to make some improvements to this legislation?
Yes, I have.
Okay, and maybe for purposes of awareing the body that, can you tell us some things that you've been trying to work on to maybe make this legislation a little bit better for working families?
No, absolutely. And these are issues that were raised in the State Affairs Committee. Several members, including myself, raised these issues at that time. And we've stayed in contact with Chairman Burrows, and I will say he's certainly been always accessible and willing to visit with us. But specifically, just the broad nature of the preemption in this bill really could hinder local government's ability just to do basic things that they do now in a wide array of areas. So we're trying to get some clarity on that, number one. And then to hone in on worker protections, workplace protections like we were just talking about, legislation that specifically calls out, as this bill does, as it comes out of committee, rest and water breaks as being prohibited from being instituted at the local level is extremely problematic for our communities around the state. And so those are two key areas of focus, I would say.
And I appreciate that, and I think that, for the purposes of this discussion, you've been working hard to try to find ways to make some modest improvements. You're not asking for an entire rewrite. You're talking about some basic rights, basic protections, if this is going to apply to every city in the state.
Well, that's exactly right. I think the premise of this bill is probably contrary to anything I could ever support, honestly. But could we at least do some minor surgery to protect a few existing rights that some workers have in the state of Texas right now?
And I know that the reason why I mention all cities is the Texas Constitution is pretty clear that we have a certain set of rules for cities that have big populations, and then we have another set of rules for cities that don't.
Right.
This proposal, am I right that if it passes, it would apply to any city, big or small?
Yes, that is my understanding of the legislation, Chairman Martinez-Fisher. I think that, right under the Constitution, a city over 5,000 has the ability to adopt a home rule charter. So this bill applies to home rule charters, but dramatically ratchets back their ability to adopt local regulations and ordinances specific to this. So it really strips away their home rule. Frankly, it runs contrary to the idea of a home rule city. And so it very much makes home rule cities much more similar to general law cities, which are the small cities of 5,000 or fewer people.
And I guess, and lastly, as it pertains to sort of statewide policy, I am aware of a number of initiatives that this body is seeking to pursue, whether it be broadband or whether it be chips and science. A lot of those federal regulations are looking to invest in cities that sort of have a local government structure that takes into account whether it be workers' rights or diversity or making sure that it's a local community that that has an interest in advancing, let's say, engineers for that matter. This law seems like it could be counterintuitive for all of our jurisdictions to be equally competitive, to see those opportunities and to take them, because let's face it, some of these decisions are being made at the national level. Some of these decisions are being made in the corporate suite. And if we have this sort of policy, how do cities distinguish themselves to be able to attract those national and business dollars?
I think it's a great point. And I fear that this bill will make it harder for us to attract some of those investments in the future because, again, like Representative Wu and I were just talking about, the workforce can vote with their feet, and they can move to a city or to a state that provides a better quality of life and is more in line with their values. And I think corporate America is increasingly on the same page there because they want to attract and retain the best employees. And if they're going to relocate or expand in a city, in a community or state that doesn't have some basic protections, they know it's going to be harder to attract and retain their workforce. So why even go there? Why not just go to a place that does?
Okay, and I think that, and I guess the goal that you're trying to accomplish is on a motion to strike, that just puts people back at the table to try to negotiate some decent changes to maybe this could get to a certain level. Maybe not everybody will support it, but some might.
Well, that's right. And to be clear, this is a good point. Not everyone probably has seen a motion or an amendment to strike the enacting clause before. Members, if you're not sure what this amendment would do, you would strike the enacting clause of the bill, which would essentially nullify the bill, gut the bill. And, and there's a lot more amendments on the floor today. If this amendment passes, I think we'll be moving on to the next time on the calendar. We can go back to the drawing board and try to come up with something that works a little better than what this bill does.
Thank you. And listen, I appreciate your work on this. I know you've worked very hard on it, and hopefully as we continue with these debates, we have an opportunity to bring some language that might take some of the sharp edges off this proposal.
Thank you. Move adoption.
The chair recognizes Mr. Burrow in opposition to the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I would ask that you go with me in opposing this amendment. Vote for your small business owner, your local community, your restaurants, and everybody who basically is in there as a business owner trying to make a living, which is the economic engine of the state of Texas. Thank you. I oppose.
The chair recognizes Mr. Turner to close on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I would ask that you vote yes on this. You didn't. Okay, yeah. Thank you. I'd ask that you vote yes on this amendment. Chairman Burrow said this is about small business owners. I represent a lot of small business owners in Tarrant County. I've not heard from a single one of them asking me to pass this bill. What they are asking me to do is invest in the workforce, invest in education, invest in healthcare, infrastructure, roads, broadband. Those are the things we should be focusing on, not undermining our cities and counties' ability to address local problems at the local level. So I ask that you vote yes on this amendment.
Mr. Turner sent an amendment. The amendment is not acceptable to the author. A record vote has been requested by Mr. Goldman. The clerk will ring the bell. Show Mr. Turner voting aye, Mr. Goldman voting nay, Mr. Burrows voting nay, Mr. Harris of Anderson voting nay, Mr. Patterson voting nay, Mr. Leach voting nay. Have all members voted? All members voted. There being 56 ayes and 90 nays, the amendment fails to adopt. Mr. Bryant, for what purpose?
Mr. Speaker, I raise a point of order against further consideration of House Bill 2127.
Please bring your report of order. Mr. Bryant, can you state your point of order for the House, please? The basis of the point of order, please.